This is the highly updated version. This is not going back in time to where we used to split these feathers with razor blades and spend hours and hours assembling these flies and putting little loops on the back so we could create this little trolley rigging and what have you. I've evolved a long ways in my fly fishing career and as a guide to make things happen a lot faster when it came to tying client flies and tying quality flies. So what I'm going to share with you guys tonight are the evolutions of these methods and where I'm at with them now. And I'm sure you guys will find some level of function in them. Okay, so first things first, I'm using a Regal shank vise. And I've always tied on shanks, not a fan of tubes. And the only reason for that is, and I'll tell you straight up, is buoyancy. Buoyancy and flexibility. Now, Pro Tube, all the weighted tubes, really cool. But then again, it's still a tube, and I'm a shank tyer, so I tie on shanks. So with what I've done is, with my partner Doug, we designed a series of shanks for those of you that tie on shanks that have a return die. A very nice, clean, tapered return die, so you don't have this giant platform for the dumbbell eye to sit on or this huge head you have to deal with. These have a nice, clean taper for the guys that like to make them pretty. But back to the Regal vise, this vise is actually designed for shanks, and it's bomber. And if any of you have a Regal vise, my original Regal vise, the vise that the Intruder was tied on, the only other vise I've ever owned besides this one, this was given to me, and it's still in perfect functioning shape, but this made life a lot easier for tying shanks. So if you're in the market for a vise and you do happen to tie on shanks, that'll do everything. You can put a tube tool, what have you, in it. But here I'm using my 51mm shank return die. And we're going to leave about 3/16. Obviously what's in the vise is going to be my connection for my ultra rig. We'll hook that up here in a sec. So obviously starting at the front, closing up the eye, run it all the way back, get a base of thread. And I have some pre-made ultra rigs here I'm going to use. Crap, there's 2 of it, or 4. Okay. So I'm going to secure this ultra rig right back here, very back. And this is done just like you do your wire. Except for I always run the tag ends through the eyes. And anymore it's just out of paranoia, because I haven't seen a whole lot of them pull out anymore, but there was a time when it seemed like if they didn't go through the eye, they pulled right off. Pull that back under. And as you can see, I'm taking this all the way back. This is just a visual thing to keep the body flat. Okay. Let's run it back up front, put the eyes on. Now I generally don't I will mess with tungsten cones and beads and what have you on my string leech patterns like the Dirty Hoe and whatnot. But when it comes to intruders, I tie one kind of intruder, and that is an intruder with an extra small eye. And the reason for that is I have no intention of ever fishing these flies deep. These are patterns to be presented in the upper part of the column. I want a fish to come get this fly, and if he doesn't want it, I don't care. That's really how I feel about it. And the other part is that if I weight these things any heavier than an extra small eye, they really suck to cast. So it, you know, and that's also an evolution in my fly tying, is that over the years, as productive as the Intruder was and all the things that it taught us, there were much better things that came down the pipe. Like my dirty hoe pattern, if I had to pick anything, that was my go-to for all my guiding, steelhead, salmon, trout, Alaska, it didn't matter. That pattern and whatever applied to the given fishery was the go-to fly. Super castable, totally predictable sink and rise rate. I mean, it's like a bullet going through the air. Anybody could cast it. Little kid could cast it. You know, they were just, and that's where it's at. If you can't make the fly land where you want and enjoy your casting, your fishing is definitely going to struggle. As much as I hate to say that, it's very true.
So that's the big difference between the Intruder and the dirty hoe. Is in fishing them deep, is that just castability?
It's a better fishing tool in general. I mean, it's just a fly with, because all the weight is focused up front, the fly has a super predictable sink and rise rate. It goes down as soon as you take the tension off, it goes down as soon as you put tension back on it, depending on what you used as for weight, whether it's a cone or a bead, it'll predictably rise very evenly under pressure. And so if I fished out into the column and it was, you know, heavy current into a really nice inside lie, but there was enough big rock in the heavy current that I definitely want to fish that, but this is my target. By the time I've penetrated that, I'm bouncing off the bottom on the inside, but with just a little manipulation of the fly line, I could get my dirty hoe to fish to literally to where it was tinking on the inside. I mean, just it'd go past me. You know, and that was a really big deal, because now I was actually picking up where the fish live, you know, because where I come from, this is where they live. They don't live out there. You know, we giant rivers and dudes casting to the middle 100 feet away and every hookup's right here. You know, it doesn't mean you can present that way, but, you know, that's where they are. You know, so being able to fish the inside was a really big deal, predictably. And again, over the years, I can't even tell you how many of my clients would be like, Jerry, I want to fish an Intruder. Jerry, I want to fish an Intruder. And this is like day 2, and I'm like, nah, let's, you know, I don't want to mess with your casting yet. And then finally, okay, fine, tie on the Intruder. 15 casts later, it's like, what's wrong with my casting? It's the Intruder. I mean, you were blazing for 3 days straight, and now look at you. You know, so just that difference was a really big deal. You know, and as a guide, that success is really, really important. So, okay, so we've got what's left in the back in the vise to connect to this ultra rig, and it's just captured back here on my little bike magnet. Okay, so what we're going to do now is make a loop back here. This will be the back station. And now you notice I put those turns around the bottom of the thread. Super important when making any type of loop, and especially a composite loop. As tight as you spin these, if those are separated at the shank or tube, it will break them. Dubbing wax, another key element in this technique. Without it, you're just bundling up materials. So I'm going to take this and put this right back here. And we'll make this shoulder. Okay, so for those of you familiar with my process, I build these little, or those that don't, I build these little assemblies on this card, and then I'll put them in this loop and spin them. The purpose of this card is the center line is my loop, it's my thread. And each one of these sections dictates a certain amount of turns. These smaller sections, top and bottom, are roughly 3 to 4 turns. This is 4 to 5 turns. And that varies obviously between the diameter of a shank and a tube, but it gives you some idea of how much area you can cover. The precision required is one thing I hear a lot. People are like, there's always too much stuff. And it's just about controlling the volume and understanding how many turns you're going to get out of said spun loop. So these dimensions give me a baseline. And then I can freely spread them out or compress them within that space after I build them. But this is my given platform for assembly. And so I just grabbed a very little amount of dubbing.
I'll try something here.
Very little. As you can see, it's a minimal amount. You can see right through it. It's just scrimmy. And that's what I like to call this layer, is the scrim layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out on that card twice the length of the space I'm trying to cover. Then what we'll do is take some of this predator wrap. And again, these are all, every loop I make, I use the same volume of predator wrap cut off the loop, or cut off of the braid. When you see how they come on a big long braid, and I just cut off either 3/4 or 1.25 inches. And the 3/4 inch chunk are going to be for smaller, like back sections, and the 1.25 inches are for front shoulders. And I generally use the same length off of here as well for both sections. That way there's a process and repeatability.
Mine's got the lean up. Looks good. All right, try that.
So since this is the back shoulder, I'm just going to use basically exactly 1 inch off of a 3/4 inch piece. Cut that off. And then I'll switch hands, take it out here, and then just pull it apart in my fingertips. And these are really, this is really the trick to this process, is that this is just almost like a master's degree in material handling. You have to just remember the processes. Like, you know, I cut it, and then I move it from that hand to this hand so I can get a purchase way back on it and then spread it out. And the reason for that is so I can evenly load it on the card. And what I did there is I laid that material 60-40. It's offset 60% on one side, and the reason for that is that when this loop is made, if you lay them even, the tips end up in the same place. Not only does it look crappy, it doesn't create as good a shoulder as it does when they're like a leaf spring. They stack up on each other and have real good support. So along with the predator wrap, this was one of the original composite loop materials, was this. This is just polar flash. Just good old polar flash. And what's interesting about this material is that each one of these fibers is multiple little fibers, and they'll pull apart and become confused and curly and look really, really nice in the loop. So as you can see, I've made these little bundles, and what I just tie a knot in them, and then I'll take and cut the exact same length. Switch, spread it out, put it on the loop. And I did the same thing with that. That's 60-40, 80-20. But what I will do here is kick the tips around a little bit back and forth so it creates a little bit of a squiggle. It's one of my favorite words, squiggle. Okay, so composite loop tricks. Notice how I have the loop between my index finger, my middle finger, and this is the reason why, is to be able to pull the thing apart. And I load everything that way. And trying to pick it apart and then put them in and then take your finger out, not good. So the reason that I did this is the loading process. So with this little section done up here, you can see how thin that is. Can everybody see that okay?
If you bring it down a little bit.
Down here?
Yeah,
That's better? Yeah, you notice how thin that is. There's not much material to it. Now, once it's all spun up and palmered forward, you'll see the effect here.
Hey Jerry.
Yo.
Anything you want like detailed show, just put it on the shank, because
Yeah,
the
the
camera's like
shank's
focused onto the shank.
Okay, copy that. Okay, so with my middle finger in there, I'm pushing down on the loop with my thumb. That's keeping it closed. Now I can put my index finger behind the loop and actually do any adjustments to this that I want with a little support on the back side. Just take my finger, do a little stab stab, make the ends uneven, and now we'll spin this. Okay, spinning. I like to kick it out here to a 90-degree angle and give that thing a good hard spin. And that way it spins up super tight. Because the key is that if you get these things really tight and can pick them out and get it back down to the thread base, these flies are pretty much indestructible. And as you can see, that's right back down to the thread with a nice little substrate of the dubbing, all the materials present. Okay, so let's get this just up out of the way. And the other key element to this is water. I always have a little bowl of water here, and the reason for this is to manipulate the material. It's really the only way to effectively part it and make it stay. And it also strengthens the thread. It fortifies the thread and keeps everything back. Put those, and as you can see, it's a hackle. It's just a hackle of material. So we're going to palmer it forward the exact same way as you would a hackle. Folding, pressing back, right in front of each other. Because that's kind of the beauty of this assembly, is that when it's all wet, you're able to stack it up really tight. And as it dries out, you know, it's going to get wet again, obviously. It's a fly, but as the material dries out and settles into position, the stuff starts to fall apart. You know, all of these materials are multiple little materials, and so it just makes a more robust shoulder over time. The flies don't lose their substance. Okay, there's a shoulder. Couple wraps, tie it down, and brush it all forward. Get it out of there. Okay. And there's the back shoulder. And it just covers up my tubing. So what we'll do here, so I'm just going to go, those are really nice from the front. Back. Okay. So this, I like to tie my intruders with a twin tail, meaning a tail off of the flank on each side. And it's just more dimension, a little bit more substance to the movement instead of just two full collars. So what I'll do is I'll take 6 to 8 right off of the stem. And I'll take them over here. And I'm going to model them. And yes, that's where all this started. We would split Amherst feathers and all kinds of other modeled really fancy feathers, and they all fell apart. And so we eventually got to the point where, you know, I have this Sharpie, I could draw on this feather that I really like and make it look any way I want. And so that's where this started and became a, I honestly have a hard time tying them now without some level of modeling in them. Okay, so this is, the tail is going to be twice as long as the hook set. So the hook point drops right there, so the tail's all the way back to there, and right on the side. I'll do this other side, same way. And if you guys have questions or anything along the way, go ahead and fire them out, because I'm okay with that.
Put that clear tube on your shank.
This back here,
yeah,
that's something I'm calling the Ultra Rig. It's a new rigging that I have been working on over the last few years, and Doug and I we just made it available. They're actually selling kits here. That
cool.
there's a video online that shows how to rig it.
You need one.
What?
So, you need one.
There with the salesman.
Really selling it, you need one.
Hey, man.
Well,
I'm hungry, I'm sick of talking about it.
Yeah.
You can check that.
Fall for it every time.
Just asking the right guy.
if I had $5 for every hook I've seen pulled off in Alaska on Alaskan Chinooks, I could probably buy everybody in here a steak dinner. No joke. And those are manufactured flies. Clients show up with hook, maybe their only trip to Alaska, maybe it's their 15th trip to Alaska. And they're hooking king and busting hooks off. Those are very unhappy people.
Yeah.
And very unhappy guides.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. So over the years, I'd been kind of goofing around with some way of resolving that issue, and I landed on the Ultra Rig. And it was something that I actually did a long, long time ago, but I couldn't find any tubing to accommodate what I was trying to accomplish, and now they actually make it. So it was...
Plus it keeps the hook fairly straight line for you too.
It does. You can replace it. You could rig it. If you want to rig the hook riding upward, you just rotate it up. If you want to rig it down, you just rotate it down.
Good barbless hook, that'll slide right over it.
Exactly. Well, and there is a way of actually replacing it on the river too. I had to figure that out because that's...
Will you show that tonight?
Yep, what?
Will you show that tonight?
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
Because I've been kind of like,
It's a lot simpler than you think.
I hope.
It is. I mean, the only thing you have to remember is that the hook you're trying to replace is garbage, right? So just cut the point off, and you can slide the whole assembly off the back, unhitch, put the tubing back on the hook, re-girth, slide it forward.
So that way you can sell more of those $200 pliers that way.
Yep.
Let me get it back in the deal.
Unless you're real cheap, try to save the shitty hooks.
These
Yeah.
Okay, so we're putting down the tinsel gold side up because I want silver when I get there. I think. Okay, there it is.
What thread are you using?
I'm using 210 denier. It has to be 210. It's really the only thing that'll tolerate those hardest spins. If you go anything lower than 210 denier, there's is it Venus? What is that? Vivus. That Vivus thread's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a little slippery for my liking, and that's really the only reason I'm not using it. It's just I'm really used to this, whatever this is. I have like hundreds and hundreds of rolls of it because all I ever use is white too, because it doesn't affect the colors that I tie with. And if I tie, like I'm going to do something on this, that will explain it perfectly. I'm going to palmer a body over this tinsel like we used to. And this is an old spay fly technique where you would put down the silver tinsel and then palmer a body over the silver tinsel, and then the light that penetrates the material bounces off the tinsel and then illuminates the body of the fly. And it works extremely well, but it's a little more time consuming, but it really looks good. And I have tried Kevlar threads and stuff too. They're just too big, and 210 was the right size, as far as I'm not really worried about big heads and stuff anymore, but I try not to, I don't. I mean, I know the fish do not care, and if my client says anything, he can bring his own damn flies. It's like, and honestly, with all the dirty hose, you can't even see the thread underneath it, so it wouldn't matter. But okay, so we've got this loop back here, and I want this material to have a taper to it, so I'm going to cut it in half.
Let's see if we can get this
So as far as stacking materials like dubbing materials, when they come out of the package, when they're cut, most dubbing materials are identical lengths. Those lengths are cut and it is identical, it's just all mismatched in the pack. So to try to find those ends, all I do is just rotate this stack, replacing the ends under my thumb and forefinger right there to create that. See how the ends are all fairly even now? It's a really easy trick for getting your dubbing lined up fairly well for what we're trying to accomplish here. So now I'm going to cut this in half. Okay.
Cheap plastic.
Let's take this loop now. We'll wax this.
No, that's not gonna happen. You guys will just have to mess up. Seriously.
A little bit of water to keep these out of the way.
This reminds me of Snake Lake when Jerry was tied in the tent, it was dark, and I was holding a flashlight for him.
Did you keep the flash?
He told me to shut up and just keep the light on.
Okay. So this is just going to be super sparse because this is just a body effect.
Is Doug gonna, oh, that's all? He did all that?
Get over here and fix the camera.
I mean, I was
God.
thinking about it, but I just wanted to let you.
Just got comfortable.
What were you saying?
Oh my God, this thing's gonna kill me. Is Doug, oh, dude, sorry. Is Doug going to sell those composite loop cards?
Yeah, we're going to have them made for real because I'm making them. I mean, and if I know that some people in here have used like a laminator machine before. Those things are really slow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how many hours I sit making these stupid little cards. And I cut them all out and then hand cut them all out. And Doug's like, send me 20 more of those. Some guys want them. And we just give them away. So it's like, this isn't making sense. Okay.
Jerry, what dubbing are you using there?
This is a custom blend. This is actually one of Doug Brutico's custom blends from a million years ago. And it's one of my little special packs. But honestly, this is identical to Fusion Dub, just a little longer, or a little shorter. Fusion Dub's a little longer. I find I'm always cutting the Fusion Dub in half. Okay, so now let's just give that a nice little spin. We'll give it a quick little brush. And these brushes, this is an EP brush, dubbing brush. These things are really cool. I've been really impressed with it.
What's EP?
What is EP? What's that? There it is. Yeah.
Sorry, I asked.
Yeah. That's why I never remember the name. Okay, so we'll just put one full turn in the back and then a nice big fat palmer. So you can still see the tinsel between each wrap. And this is just a lot more pop. I'm going to take the rest of this and put it right here. This will be my hot spot. Okay. Okay. Nice little tinsel body wrap. And those things really pop in the water too. You can see them a long ways away on a good lighting day. Okay, forward, shoulder, and hackle. Okay. And you can see I have this card marked out, and the back station, forward station, and then, or wait, back station, I didn't even know I had it. Back station, forward station, and then the rear hackle. Part of my fingers, the index, I just put the dubbing right there and then pull it apart. I've got some there, and then just keep stacking it until I've got roughly as much of it as I want stacked up evenly. You see how all the ends now are back the way they are?
And does that tend to align as you do it? 'Cause
Yep, absolutely. That's the point of it.
It's not as self-explanatory as, like, I've tried it, you know, with Dutch, there's in so many different directions. And so when I try to do that, I just seem to wind up with the same, like, ugly wad.
And it very well could be that there's too much, you're working with too much material. Because if you take a big, huge pile, all you're doing is just kind of taking it off the top. Well, when you're working with small amounts, I'm actually taking what's on top or what is on the outside of it and making it part of the pile now. And if it wants to pull out, I'll let it and then just stack it up again until I'm back to what I need.
You need 2 cameras, Jason.
No, he's killing it.
That means I need an 80-inch TV. Or I mean a 160-inch TV.
Okay.
Cool.
So actually,
Which I'm not opposed to.
and this is how the Predator wrap, that's how you purchase it. They're in these big braided hanks. So for the forward shoulder, I have this little measuring device on the back of my board here that I use for these operations. That'd be forward hackle stuff.
What's your measurement? Do you know? Jerry?
Huh?
Do you know about how long your measurement?
Oh, how long that was? 1.25 inches-ish? It's about how much I'm cutting it off. It's about 3/4 of an inch worth of braid for back stations, 1.25 inches for the front, and then just get everybody in the party.
Yeah, he's aimed right at your card right now.
What's that?
The camera's aimed right at your card.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay. So let's get these scragglers out of here. They mess up my party. And I'm going to use a nice 1-inch huck, just like that. Swap it back over, cut that out. Between my thumb and forefinger, and then just spread them out again. And you can use your toothbrush for that too if you want. Sometimes there's some really heavily confused ones in there, and taking the toothbrush to it fixes it right up. Setting it on the card. Use some more polar flash. Now I'm going to cut this one about 3/16 shorter than that the first batch of polar flash or Predator wrap, just to make different dimension, a little bit heavier shoulder here.
Jerry, as you push that back, where would you want the ends of that to fall in relation to your rear hackle?
I don't understand the question.
So if you were to just push that back, where would you want the ends of your forward hackle to lie?
Okay, where you want them to fall? I like them to fall about right here. And when I do the forward hackle, I'll show you how I do that check. When I put them in the loop, I actually check the bunch to see that it's going to fall right where it's want, because I like a nice little halo over the body. And as the current slows, the hackle opens up a little bit more and gets a little wigglier. But if you go too long, it destroys the whole profile. And if you go too short and you have a good shoulder, the shoulder will actually create a little eddy behind it, and it'll pull the hackle tips in there, and it makes the fly look really weird. I actually find it infuriating. I do. It just drives me crazy. It's like, oh, it just looks like
Jerry,
shit.
you went 60/40 on that one again too?
Yep. Yep. 60/40 is about where I land most of the time, unless I'm trying to make something a little wispier, and then I'll push it out to like 80/20. Now I'm using some of this EP brush, and what I like about the EP brush is the volume it comes in. It's set for me. It's a nice thin, clean amount. I can see length. It's all there. And as you can see, I just work my way down. I'm cutting off however much I need. Now you can palmer these things too, but I hate to cut them, and I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the segmented effect of component tying. That's kind of why I like this, is it created this more seamless effect. Now that's going on there like 90-10, those little butt sections right on the center line. And we'll take that little extra, and we'll fold that over the top and give that a push down, slide it up out of the way.
There's a lot to do with how it comes out. Except
And it goes way faster when you're not talking about it.
Maybe.
Okay. I just took that out of the pack, lined it up. This is going to be for the forward hackle. Okay, forward hackle. Obviously, most people like tips on their hackles. The cool thing about ostrich is that it has each fiber are flat, and so they have some pretty cool resilience. And when you tie them in this loop technique, that turns each one of those flats in a different angle, and it creates a different effect than it does when you palmer it. And I've always really liked the way it looks. And it also ends up with a very controlled amount, can do a very specific thing, instead of trying to say, okay, how much of this tip do I need to palmer on this thing, and the tips are varied lengths. I'm going to take 1.25 inches of this between my thumb and forefinger, cut it off of here. And then I'm just going to take these ends and chase them together. I'll come out here to the very end of the tips and just shake it out, make sure there's no real shorties in there. And now we'll find length for the loop. And you can see how much material I have here. I'm going to probably be somewhere in there. But I checked length by just putting it right where I finished that shoulder. And it's landing right at the eye of the hook. So by the time I palmer that, it's going to be pretty good. So switch hands and cut this off. Rid of that. Pull these ends apart. And this is what a toothbrush is really good for. Creates this nice little Velcro, pretty decent spread. Everybody see that okay?
No, the camera's
Is that the
on
card?
the
Oh, it's on the card now.
Yeah,
Gosh,
this
you're
is
just
how you're
messing
doing
with me.
that.
Okay, so
Yeah, when we see that.
there you go. You see how I use my thumb finger to put that down in there? And then fold this over. Slide that up. Okay. So, another dubbing loop.
Are you done on the card?
Yep.
Why no modeling on the front?
You could if you wanted to. I kind of like the not so and have some, so it doesn't all start to blend together. Because I'm also going to use this as a wing, so there's a little modeling in there.
Is that clear? I can't tell.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
So shoulder first. Put that in. I try to get the wax off my fingers before I pick up this one. Stick it in. All I'm going to do is get the tips fairly matched out, and then I will spread them out a little here. So once you install it in the loop, the tips will be a little wacky. Just use your finger to line them all up, and then you can do this little spread out. Okay.
You're getting photographed here.
What's that?
You're gonna get photographed.
Oh,
Gee,
Not so much you. Not so much you. But
yeah, fly, not me. Okay. There we go. Okay, so that's what we got. So now we're just going to get them all lined up and do the same thing. Good, hard, fast spin. So that thing spins up tight. Okay, and then straight to the pick. I do a couple passes with this just to get out anything that's seriously trapped, so I don't break any of my tips off here. Okay, and then I beat the crap out of it with this thing. Like my gut buddy Trevor Kovich used to say that my flies, they're fished for like 5 days before they even touch the river, as mean as I am to them. Because their durability is a really big deal to me. That they last a long time. I'm happy to cut a fly off when there's no material left and there's just a hook and eyes poking out the back. Okay, again, water. And a good split. And I just take my time making sure that it's all parted back, like rocking the loop back and forth like that will make everything match up, get it all straight, going the same direction. And same thing with all the tips in the front. So now that it's a hackle, let's get this thread up out of the way. And winding it nice and tight forward, right in front of each other. Right up behind the eyes, and I come up over the top, a couple wraps. Get rid of this. And I'll put one whip finish here so I can beat it up again without this coming apart. Just brush all this forward. Okay. And one kind of fun thing about this is that what I do now is I actually have this little hair dryer set up that I put the eye of the hook on, flip on the hair dryer, and it sits over there and flops around and dries out. I can't do it with my wife home; it drives her crazy. But she laughed the first time she saw it, though. She goes, "Is that your swim tank?" I go, "No, it's the hair salon."
Casting tank.
Yeah. But once they dry out, they just take up their own little character. Okay, so that part. So now we're just going to put a ring down the middle.
So the body of this fly has a lot of flash in it. Do you ever tie these with less flash?
Mm-hmm. Then what I do is go down. I will almost always use the predator wrap, but I'll go the other way. Like I won't use the polar flash, and the EP brush that I'll go for starts to get more natural and not as flashy, right? And that'll become the substance in the actual brush itself. or in each loop. And there are a lot of materials you can use in there too. I mean, you can spin just about any feather you want. You can put it in the loop, either cut off the stem or on the stem. Like I'll take my favorite thing to do for our sea run cutthroats back home and any of my small trouty flies is to take mallard flats, make a loop, and sandwich them in a little bit of dubbing, and then cut off the very top, pull everything back, and then spin those in the loop. And if you've ever used mallard flat, you know what a pain in the ass they are to do. But when it's spun in a loop, all the tips are going different directions, and the effect that thing has is amazing. Golden pheasant tippets, any pheasant tippet, you can stick them in the composite loop. Turkey flats. The turkey flat was our bread and butter for eons, and whether it didn't matter what they were, the turkey flats were going in there. You know, so you can flash them up, you can dial them way back down. You know.
So more of a fishing question, what makes you grab a flashy fly versus a dull fly?
Okay, so a lot of the flashy stuff is, it has a lot to do with the properties of the material and not so much the fact that they're flashy, but what I like about the outcome of this is the transparency, the depth the fly has when it's completely saturated in the column. They don't look opaque, they look transparent, and they're transparent within the color scheme you've chosen. And if you like are really into contrast, where a lot of the steelhead flies I do, they're either, you know, bright white and pink and orange and things like that, or they're serious pink, black, orange, black. Contrast with the contrast, then in turn, you know, with, you know, like a bright lavender body tied that way, it still has your black and blue effect, but it's also glowing very nicely with this nice depth of character to it. You know, they have more personality, I guess. Because I am not flash. Flash is for clients. I've spent more hours than I can count sitting on the bottom of the river with my buddies a long time ago trying to prove this point or not. And my friend Scott Hackl is the only person who tied a fly where flash actually has a function. Why? Because the whole freaking fly is flash. And that's why. What happened, soon as we got below the back of the fly, soon as we were lower than the fly was in the water, we no longer saw the flash. All it was a white frickin' stripe. No matter what color the flash was, no matter what configuration it was a white fricking stripe. As soon as we got even with the fly, then you would start to see flash. And it started a fair ways upstream, but it had to be pretty darn clear. So we evolved. The only thing you could see at a distance was a fly that was nothing but flash. And there's got to be enough refraction in a fly that's nothing but flash to flash a little. Right? So it's like a spoon. But so for me personally, the flash in this concept is just about depth of color, transparency, and not so much the flash thing.
If your goal is that transparent character, is that why I don't see a lot of marabou in your flies?
Yeah, I won't use marabou because of its durability. Durability is a big deal to me. And I mean, I have a log on my wall at home that is retired flies. It's a big cottonwood log, and it's dripping with them now. And I have intruders in there, flies tied just like this, that have 2 right angles bent in them. 2 right angles. How in the hell did you ever pull that off? The eyes are gone, the fly is bent twice. 2 right angles on a shank that long. I mean, the things I've seen are unbelievable. And that fly was brand new. He just started fishing. I mean, it was like, how did this happen? So, and you know, that was my fly, and he beat the thing to living hell. And so that durability over the course of a day, and 400,000 smacks behind you, and snagged and being pile driven back up into the snag, and you know, so all of that added up, and you know, Marabou doesn't last. Couple fish, it's gone. And that doesn't work for me. And again, it's like, you know, my fly tying was, it was out of necessity for a very, very long time. So having to sit down and tie multitudes of flies every night, it was kind of a pain. Okay. So we've got the little overwing, same length as the forward hackle. Now we'll go with a little tinted grizzly hackle here. And I generally almost always try to take them off, one off the right, one off the left. But if I can find two up the middle that are very similar, that's okay too. Okay, so I'll put these face to face, match the ends up, find my length, one a little shorter, right there. I'll strip them both. Pull that up. Move this little bastard. The other side. And I just kind of pinch them into position, put a few wraps on them, and then pull them across the eye to get them to set into position. Because I kind of like them offset, not straight down the side. Okay, we'll tie that off. All right, and there's an intruder.